You're watching the Aloha Statesman, a Hawaii News Now special presentation.
Senator Akaka has racked up more than 2 million frequent flyer miles. The route here to Washington began in the bicentennial, 1976, when he won Hawaii's Congressional District 2 seat. He served in the House for 14 years.
I do.
In May 1990, after the death of Spark Matsunaga, Governor John Wahe'e appointed him to the U.S. Senate.
Without question, this is the most exciting day of my life.
But come autumn of that year, Akaka launched into what he calls the toughest campaign of his career.
And so for this election, I ask you to stand with me.
A special election against Republican Pat Saiki.
To Dan Akaka, I say, please stop distorting my record.
He brought in a big gun to Hawaii to campaign alongside him.
Give them Danny Akaka back in the United States Senate.
Colleague and friend, Senator Ted Kennedy.
He said, Danny, I want to help you.
The seasoned politicians would even sing Itsy Bitsy Spider to a group of Hawaii school kids.
Itsy Bitsy Spider climbs up the water spout.
With Kennedy's help, Akaka won that hard-fought race, and over the decades would be re-elected another 3 full terms.
And he is the first native Hawaiian, a Polynesian to serve in this body, the first Native American to serve in this body.
He's also the only senator of Chinese descent, and his cultural identity has been the driving force behind much of his legislation. He was instrumental in getting President Bill Clinton to sign the 1993 Apology Resolution into law, acknowledging the U.S. overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom.
I would say 100% of the senators here know the history of Hawaii because Senator Akaka has made sure.
And for more than a decade, he's worked tirelessly, yet unsuccessfully, for federal recognition of Native Hawaiians with legislation commonly known as the Akaka Bill. Its failure to pass has been one of his biggest disappointments.
I've never been able to get that bill to the floor of the Senate. And the reason is there's always one objection, and if there's an objection, that's it, it's out.
Akaka says it boils down to race and the impression the bill shows favoritism to Native Hawaiians. Some politicos believe if Akaka had been in the Senate during an era of greater compromise, he could have pushed the bill through.
The 90s and now, it's just harder to get parochial stuff passed because it looks like you're looking out only for a special interest.
Of course, Congress has changed in 3 decades. We now hear of more partisanship and gridlock in Washington. But Senator Akaka remembers a time when a gentleman's agreement meant everything.
My fellow senators, I extend to each one of you my warmest aloha.
Since he first walked the halls of Congress, this quiet statesman has been the political ambassador of Aloha.
Oh, yeah, aloha!
Time and again, members and staff stop to shake hands and talk story with the senator. And it's not often you hear this exchange between a Democrat and a Republican.
Love you, Betty.
Hey, you're looking good and love you too.
What are you going to miss most about Washington?
My friends and my colleagues. You know, we've had such good relationships over the years.
Although considered to be quite liberal, he's the last of what some call a bygone generation in the Senate, when lawmakers figured out how to create personal connections with political friends and foes alike, and use them to forge compromises on big bills.
This is one of the best people we've ever had here.
That from conservative Republican Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions, who attends weekly prayer breakfasts with Akaka.
You got a lot of people with a lot of talk and no action. He's one of those guys that talks softly and gets results.
Terrible temper. Oh, wait a minute, that's a different senator. That's a different senator. No, Danny Akaka, probably the greatest gentleman in the Senate.
The one lawmaker he worked with the longest, Hawaii's revered former Senator Daniel Inouye. Inouye's recent passing affected Akaka deeply.
But this chamber will never be the same without him.
Some have wondered if it was difficult for Akaka to be the state's junior senator for so many years. Until the very end, Akaka was always proud to be on what he called Dan's team.
There are some members who wouldn't like that and would, end up fighting with him because they want to get credit for things. He's always been, if you can get this for Hawaii, I want to help you. You tell me what I can do to help get this for Hawaii.
Before he passed away, Inoue told us it comes down to a matter of legislative style, and Akaka's approach embodies Hawaii.
One of the most conscientious, however, the least partisan member of the U.S. Senate any of us have ever known. Oftentimes, his gentle demeanor could be misunderstood, that he's weak, but he is actually a very strong fellow.
Inoue added his longtime friend and colleague stands by what he believes in, something he admired in this era of fair-weather politics. In the wake of 9/11, for instance, in 2002, Akaka was one of only 23 senators to vote no to going to war in Iraq.
Some felt I was being unpatriotic, but I felt, no, it's not going to help our country.
Despite his opposition to the Iraq War itself, he visited U.S. troops there in 2006 and in Afghanistan in 2004.
God bless America, my home sweet home.
And if his patriotism was questioned, it was short-lived. Capitol Hill colleagues across the board say veterans have no bigger champion than the former World War II soldier.
There will never, ever, ever be another Senator Akaka. There's no question about that. Senator Akaka's legacy, without question, will be Veterans Affairs.
For 4 years, he chaired the Veterans Affairs Committee and in 2007 helped pass the largest single year of funding for the Veterans Administration. In 2010, he authored and sponsored the Caregivers and Veterans Omnibus Health Services Act, which allows family caregivers of wounded troops to receive salaries if they quit their jobs to care for loved ones. He also brought attention to the invisible wounds of PTSD, something, remember, he experienced firsthand after the war. Frank Lautenberg, now the only current senator who served in World War II, says Akaka distinguished himself on veterans issues.
People will look at how the veterans are treated and will use the Akaka example to say, look, you serve and you will be taken care of where your needs are created.
But politics, as they say, is a contact sport, and the senator has been in the business long enough to know criticism comes with the territory. In 2006, Time magazine named Akaka one of the country's 5 worst senators, the master of the minor. The article disparaged him for sponsoring a handful of innocuous resolutions and unambitious bills that died in committee.
And I do it with respect, but I do it with honesty. That Senator Akaka's career has not been marked by significant achievement.
That same year, Ed Case challenged Akaka for his Senate seat. It was a controversial move within the local Democratic Party, and in the end, Akaka won by 7 points. The seasoned politician says opponents and the media often come with their own agendas.
Disappointing sometimes, when you, of course, very often you disagree, but that's all you do.
There have been times when people have said things that were untrue about his legislation, and I've wanted to push back harder, but he's always, his first rule is, be nice.
Criticism often falls hardest on the families. Mrs. Akaka, who considers herself the original Tiger Mom, remembers back in the early days when a constituent got hold of their home phone number and called their house to complain about her husband.
So finally I told one fella, I said, if you're so smart, why don't you run for the office?
Their daughter, Milani, overheard the conversation.
Says, Ma, I don't think Dad's going to make it if you keep telling these people where to go. I said, okay. But he's been in 36 years, so.
Different senators get their job done in different ways. Some are out front, some are show horses, some are workhorses. Senator Akaka was just a quiet force.
While he was most visible on veterans issues, Native Hawaiian rights, and as chairman of the Indian Affairs Committee, the senator also fought hard on other matters, like stopping target practice on Koho'olave.
We have called for an end to the bombing. We have been rebuffed. We can no longer continue to wait.
In the 1980s, as chairman of the House Space Caucus, a forward-thinking Akaka pushed for commercializing space activities.
Liftoff.
Something quite common today, but virtually unheard of 30 years ago.
I spoke about bringing in the private sector, which NASA wasn't happy.
He's also been a strong supporter of financial literacy and is credited with something you may see on your monthly financial statements, known in banking circles as the Akaka box.
And it's a box on credit card statements that clearly identifies the interest that you will pay if you defer your payments.
Whether he's chairing a hearing or hustling off to vote, politicos describe him as a lawmaker who's always advocating for Hawaii's people. And the doors to his D.C. office are open wide to island constituents.
Thank you so much.
Mr. and Mrs. Akaka don't just shake hands. They sit and talk story in his Senate office with their visitors. And the ever-popular Millie Akaka, in her mu'u-mu'u and bare feet, makes the locals feel right at home.
I turn around, there was the audience with shaka signs.
The senator likes to tell constituents about one of the times he rode aboard Air Force One with President Barack Obama.
I was so surprised. I looked at the menu, and I looked around. I thought, gee, I wonder who else knows. There it was on the menu. The main dish was manapua.
In all, Senator Akaka has served with 6 presidents.
And who do I get a call from? President Reagan.
He's gone fishing with Jimmy Carter and hit the links with Clinton.
Senator Akaka is a dedicated golfer and one of my favorite golf companions.
For almost 4 decades, Senator Akaka has been on the front lines of our nation's history and helped shape much of it. Now, he and his wife are drafting a new bit of history. Only this time, it's much more personal. What's next for the Akakas? In just a moment.